On December 23, 2013, His Majesty the Emperor will celebrate his 80th birthday. During the reign of Emperor Shōwa as His Imperial Highness the Crown Prince, and now as His Majesty the Emperor in his reign of Heisei, which stands for peace and achievement, together with Her Majesty the Empress, His Majesty's thoughts have always been with the people. Throughout these 80 long years, His Majesty has continuously given thought to the symbolic role of the Emperor, as well as the role of the imperial family. His Majesty was born on December 23, 1933. The whole nation was filled with joy at the news of the birth of the new Crown Prince, for which the people of Japan had been waiting for so long. When only 3 years old, His Majesty began to live away from his parents, Emperor Shōwa and Empress Kojun, in the Togu Palace in Akasaka, as was the custom at the time. Japan was entering a tense period around then. In 1941, when His Majesty was 8 years old, the Pacific War began, and His Majesty had to be evacuated, joining his classmates and other schoolmates, first to Numazu, then to Nikko, and finally to Okunikko. After the end of the war, His Majesty returned to Tokyo and was greatly shocked to see that Tokyo had been burnt to the ground. In 1946, Mrs. Elizabeth Gray Vining of the United States was invited to Japan to teach His Majesty English as his private tutor. When His Majesty was asked by Mrs. Vining, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" His Majesty's response was, "I shall be the Emperor." In senior high school, His Majesty served as captain of the equestrian club and won in show jumping in the Tokyo Equestrian Federation competition. Subsequently, he competed in many equestrian events. In November 1952, on turning 18 years old, His Majesty attended the Ritaishi no Rei, investiture as Crown Prince and coming-of-age ceremony. In 1953, 1 year after the Treaty of Peace with Japan was signed, His Majesty traveled overseas for the first time to attend the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom on behalf of Emperor Shōwa. His travels lasted 6 months, during which he visited 15 countries. In 2012, reflecting on this visit, His Majesty said that, "It was a trip during which I learned and experienced much. Coming from a country devastated by war, it pained me to observe the affluent lifestyles of the people in those countries, which was such a contrast to the situation in Japan at the time. This left a deep impression on my mind." On April 10, 1959, then Crown Prince Akihito married Miss Michiko Shōda. A parade was held from the Imperial Palace to Togu Palace, the new residence of the imperial couple. More than 500,000 people lined the road to see and cheer the young couple. After their marriage, as a young Crown Prince and Princess, Their Majesties together visited various regions of Japan, meeting people from all walks of life and experiencing the history and culture of the respective regions. Before his accession to the throne, His Majesty had already traveled to all of the prefectures in Japan, visiting a total of 773 municipalities. Their Majesties began attending various ceremonies, such as the National Inter-High School Championship, the National Arbor Day Festival, the National Convention for the Development of an Abundantly Productive Sea, and they continue to do so to this day. From the time when they were Crown Prince and Princess, Their Majesties have cared for persons with disabilities. In particular, they have encouraged the development of sports for the disabled and supported the hosting of the Paralympic Games in Tokyo in 1964, when His Majesty served as the honorary president of the event. Their Majesties were responsible for the founding of the National Sports Games for the Disabled in the following year, 1965. Except for 1988, when Emperor Shōwa lay ill, Their Majesties attended the opening ceremony every year until 1989, the first year of the Heisei period, and have promoted the Games by watching almost all of the events. When His Majesty was still Crown Prince, His Majesty started inviting people from all walks of life to Togu Palace, expressing appreciation for their services and offering them words of encouragement. Members of the Japanese Youth Missions Abroad program, a program that was established to commemorate the wedding of Their Majesties, the Emperor and the Empress. Recipients of the Crown Prince Akihito Scholarship. The Japan Overseas Cooperation Volunteers. National Women Guidance Officials for Juveniles. Recipients of the Maternal and Child Health Promotion Award. In addition, Their Majesties met with many young administrative officials leaving Japan to take up work as long-term researchers abroad. When His Majesty was still the Crown Prince, together with the Crown Princess, Their Majesties visited many countries as representative of Emperor Shōwa. The first country they visited after their marriage was the United States in 1960. The purpose of the visit was to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Treaty of Amity and Commerce between Japan and the United States. Their Majesties' travels abroad then were often very long, with over half of their visits lasting 2 weeks or more, and some even lasting 28 days. During this period, as Crown Prince and Princess, Their Majesties made 22 visits abroad, visiting a total of 42 countries. Their Majesties chose to raise their 3 children, the Crown Prince, Prince Akishino, and Princess Nori, by their side at Togu Palace. His Majesty has said that, "The home is the place that gives me peace of mind and where I am given strength to carry out my duties." Their Majesties carried out their duties while raising all 3 children at the palace. He has expressed his gratitude to Emperor Shōwa and Empress Kojun for allowing them to do so. On January 7, 1989, Emperor Shōwa passed away at the age of 87, and His Majesty acceded to the throne as the 125th Emperor of Japan. The new era was named Heisei, and on November 12, 1990, the following year, the enthronement ceremony was solemnly held at the Seiden State Hall.
先に日本国憲法及び皇室典範の定めるところによって皇位を継承しましたが、ここに即位礼正殿の儀を行い、即位を内外に宣明いたします。
On the occasion of his accession, His Majesty spoke as follows. I intend to fulfill my duties as Emperor, keeping in mind the role of the Emperor stipulated in the Constitution. I will remember Emperor Shōwa and all of the other emperors from ancient times who wished for the happiness of the people of Japan. And I intend to seek a role for the imperial house that is suitable for the modern age. His Majesty began performing his duties as Emperor. The Constitution of Japan, Article 1, stipulates that the Emperor shall be the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people, deriving his position from the will of the people with whom resides sovereign power. The duties of His Majesty are to perform the acts of the Emperor in matters of state stipulated in the Constitution. His Majesty attends the opening of the National Diet and gives a speech. In the imperial investiture, His Majesty appoints the Prime Minister as designated by the Diet. His Majesty appoints the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and appoints and dismisses ministers of state and other public officials. His Majesty confers the Grand Cordon of the Order of the Rising Sun in spring and autumn, and the Order of Cultural Merit in autumn. The recipients of the Order of Cultural Merit and the Service Medal are then invited to the Imperial Palace for tea. A horse-drawn carriage of the Imperial Household Agency is prepared for the newly appointed foreign ambassadors, who present their letter of credentials from their head of state. His Majesty greets the newly appointed ambassadors in the Matsunoma stateroom of the Imperial Palace, receives their credentials, and exchanges a few words with them. Soon after this, the ambassadors and their spouses are invited to the imperial residence for tea, where their majesties have a friendly chat with them. After spending more than 3 years in Japan, the ambassadors and their spouses are invited to luncheon with their majesties. The ambassadors are also invited to the palace when they leave Japan, and their majesties thank them for their services during their time in Japan. At New Year's, a reception is held where their majesties, the Emperor and Empress, receive New Year greetings from the members of the Imperial House, cabinet ministers, members of the Diet, the Chief Justice, and justices of the Supreme Court, and many others. The ceremony of the New Year's lectures at court is where their majesties receive lectures at the beginning of the year from experts in various fields, such as humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and others. One of the traditional New Year ceremonies carried out from ancient times is the New Year's poetry reading ceremony. Here, poems written by His Majesty and Her Majesty are read in the traditional manner. His Majesty's daily official duties at the Imperial Palace and the Imperial Residence include ratifying and signing the documents in order to promulgate laws, cabinet orders and treaties, appoint and dismiss public officials, and authenticate credentials. His Majesty sometimes reads more than 1,000 documents a year. His Majesty also receives reports from the Prime Minister and Ministers of State regarding matters of state. His Majesty contributes to the promotion of academics, culture and the arts by attending a variety of ceremonies to present awards to people from abroad and Japan who have made outstanding achievements in these fields. He also cares about the younger researchers and supported the founding of the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science Ikushi Prize, which rewards their achievements. Their Majesties meet with people from a variety of fields, inside and outside the Imperial Palace and the Imperial Residence. His Majesty receives in audience the recipients of the Order of Merit at the Imperial Palace in spring and autumn. Their Majesties meet with people who have made contributions in various fields. The winners and officials from the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games are invited to the Imperial Palace, where their Majesties congratulate them and thank them for their hard work. His Majesty has been meeting with the members of the Japan Disaster Relief Team since he was Crown Prince. Winners of the Emperor's Prize at the Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries Festival are invited to the Imperial Palace, where their Majesties listen to their reports. Every year, the prefectural governors from throughout Japan are invited to the Imperial Palace, and His Majesty asks them about the situation in their respective regions. People who have actively contributed to the international community as volunteers are invited to the Imperial Residence, and His Majesty asks them about their activities. Their Majesties meet with people from throughout Japan who offer their services to clean the Imperial Palace grounds and listens to their reports about the situation in their local areas. Twice a year, in spring and autumn, about 2,000 people from all walks of life are invited to a garden party, where their Majesties enjoy conversing with the guests. In total, His Majesty meets over 30,000 people at various events every year. When including those who come to the Imperial Palace to celebrate the New Year and His Majesty's birthday, the number of people would exceed 130,000. Just as in the days when he was Crown Prince, His Majesty, together with Her Majesty, visits various regions throughout Japan several times each year, valuing the interactions with the people. Every year, His Majesty, together with Her Majesty, attends the National Arbor Day Festival, the National Sports Festival, the National Convention for the Development of an Abundantly Productive Sea, and one of the international conferences held in Japan.
Distinguished guests in China for the success.
On those occasions, Their Majesties take the opportunity to visit as many welfare facilities as possible, to offer warm words of comfort to the elderly, people with disabilities, and children in those facilities. It has become an annual tradition for Their Majesties to visit the welfare facilities in Tokyo and the surrounding areas on Children's Day, Respect for the Aged Day, and the Week of Persons with Disabilities. For many years, His Majesty, together with Her Majesty, has been offering support to patients suffering from Hansen's disease, who have led difficult lives, subjected to prejudice and discrimination. To date, Their Majesties have visited 12 of the 14 Hansen's disease sanatoriums in Japan. After visiting the sanatorium in Okinawa, His Majesty wrote a ryuka poem, a traditional Okinawan short verse, about the welcome he received, with music composed by Her Majesty at His Majesty's request. His Majesty receives a warm welcome from people everywhere that he visits. At night, when the people gather to welcome Their Majesties with paper lanterns, they respond by waving back with their paper lanterns. On the occasion of the commemoration ceremony of the 20th anniversary of His Majesty's accession to the throne, His Majesty made the following statement.
即位以来、国内各地を訪問することに努め、15年で全ての都道府県を訪れることができました。国と国民の姿を知り、国民と気持ちを分かち合うことを大切なことであると考えてきました。それぞれの地域で高齢化をはじめとしてさまざまな課題に対応を迫られていることが察せられましたが、訪れた地域はいずれもそれぞれに美しく、容易でない状況の中でも人々が助け合い、自分たちの住む地域を少しでも向上させようと努力している姿を頼もしく見てきました。これからも皇后とともに各地に住む人々の生活に心を寄せていくつもりです。
In March 2011, Japan was struck by the Great East Japan earthquake. Registering magnitude 9.0, it was the largest earthquake on record to strike Japan. A few days after the earthquake, His Majesty spoke on television to the people. In his message, the Emperor offered words of comfort to those affected by the quake and expressed appreciation to those engaged in relief activities, and hoped that all Japanese people would continue to care for the afflicted areas and the people for years to come. His Majesty always thinks of the people and hopes that their lives are safe and sound. When a major natural disaster occurs in the country, their Majesties try to visit the afflicted region as soon as possible. Their Majesties mourn for the victims of the afflicted regions and offer warm words of comfort to those who are living under difficult conditions in temporary evacuation centers. His Majesty also thanks the people who are working on rescue activities in the afflicted regions. After the Great East Japan earthquake, His Majesty visited evacuation centers in various areas 7 weeks in a row and offered words of comfort and encouragement to the victims of the disaster. In March 2012, His Majesty underwent heart bypass surgery. A week after leaving hospital, he attended the memorial service to commemorate the first anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake and made the following statement.
被災地の今後の復興の道のりには多くの困難があることと予想されます。国民皆が被災者に心を寄せ、被災地の状況が改善されていくよう、たゆみなく努力を続けていくよう期待しています。そしてこの大震災の記憶を忘れることなく子孫に伝え、防災に対する心がけを育み、安全な国土を目指して進んでいくことが大切と思います。今後、人々が安心して生活できる国土が築かれていくことを一同と共に願い、御霊への追悼の言葉といたします。先の大戦においてかけがえのない命を失った数多くの人々とその遺族を思い、深い悲しみを新たにいたします。私の幼い日の記憶は3歳の時、昭和12年に始まります。この年に盧溝橋事件が起こり、戦争は昭和20年の8月まで続きました。したがって私は戦争のない時を知らないで育ちました。
1995 marked 50 years since the end of the war. Their Majesties, the Emperor and the Empress, visited Nagasaki, Hiroshima and Okinawa, places which suffered particularly heavy damage in the war. His Majesty has called August 15th, the anniversary of the end of the war, August 6th and 9th, the days on which atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and June 23rd, when the war in Okinawa came to an end, as days which must never be forgotten. It was His Majesty's strong wish that made possible the journey to commemorate the war dead and pray for peace, including visits to Iwo Jima and the Tokyo Memorial Hall to mark the 50-year anniversary of the end of the war. After completing this journey, His Majesty reflected on the experience and said, "Thanks to the untiring efforts of the people, Japan has been reconstructed out of a state of total devastation and has continued to develop over the past 50 years. I am deeply aware that the peace and prosperity our country enjoys today is built upon the sacrifices of many people. I shall continue to pray for all those who died as a consequence of this war, never forgetting the grief of the bereaved families, and will continue to wish for world peace." In June 2005, 60 years after the war, Their Majesties visited Saipan. This was their first visit to a foreign country for the purpose of commemorating the war dead. His Majesty has always cared deeply for disabled soldiers and families who lost loved ones in the war. He has encouraged the improvement of social systems to support the bereaved families. His Majesty has often spoken of the importance of speaking about and handing down to future generations the tragedies of war.
戦後に生まれた人々が年々多くなってくる今日、戦没者を追悼することは自分たちの生まれる前の世代の人々がいかなる世界、社会に生きてきたかを理解することになり、世界や日本の過去の歴史を顧みる一つの機会となることと思います。過去のような戦争の惨禍が二度と起こらないよう、戦争や戦没者のことが戦争を直接知らない世代の人々に正しく伝えられていくことを心から願っています。
In 1993, His Majesty became the first reigning emperor to visit Okinawa. During the Pacific War, Okinawa experienced large-scale ground warfare that also involved civilians. His Majesty has cared strongly about Okinawa since the time when he was Crown Prince. At the Okinawa Peace Memorial Hall, His Majesty spoke about his feelings for Okinawa.
先の戦争では実に多くの 失われました。中でも沖縄県が占領となり、住民を巻き込む地上戦が行われ、20万の人々が犠牲となったことに対し、言葉に尽くせぬものを感じます。
His Majesty first visited Okinawa in 1975 when he was Crown Prince. He visited several monuments commemorating the war, including the Konpaku Monument, the Himeyuri Monument, and the Okinawa Shihan Kenji Monument, and prayed for the victims of the war. Ever since, on the occasion of their visits to Okinawa, His Majesty, together with Her Majesty, visits the memorials for the war dead on the first day of the visit without fail. While he was Crown Prince, before Okinawa reverted to Japan, Their Majesties would invite elementary and junior high school students from Okinawa attending the mainland Japan Okinawa Young Journalists Assembly and ask them about the local conditions in Okinawa. At the press conference for his birthday in 2012, His Majesty made the following remarks about Okinawa. I feel it is so important that all the people of Japan are always mindful of the many problems Okinawa is facing. No other place in Japan has experienced ground warfare where so many lives were lost. I feel it is important for all Japanese people to share with the people of Okinawa the memory of the calamity sustained by Okinawa in the last war. His Majesty has visited many countries together with Her Majesty over the years. Based on the belief that exchanges between individuals play a major role in deepening goodwill between countries, His Majesty has met with many members of royal families, heads of state, and important government officials of foreign countries to deepen mutual understanding and friendship. Their Majesties, the Emperor and Empress, have visited 56 countries in the more than 50 years of their marriage. His Majesty respects the cultures and traditions of other countries and has always valued sincere and cordial exchanges with each country. When abroad, His Majesty tries to visit memorials for the war dead whenever possible. His Majesty also meets with people who have contributed to Japan and expresses his gratitude to them. In 2012, His Majesty visited the United Kingdom and expressed in English his gratitude for the support given by the people of the United Kingdom to Japan after the Great East Japan earthquake.
The Empress and I, as well as so many of our people, were deeply moved by the immediate response of people in the United Kingdom in the aftermath of the tragic disaster that struck Japan on March 11th last year.
Their Majesties do not only meet with heads of state and important officials when they visit a foreign country. They always value holding heartfelt exchanges with the ordinary citizens of each country as well. Their Majesties always try to schedule as many visits as possible to welfare facilities, such as homes for the elderly, childcare centres and hospitals. Their concern for people in difficult positions remain the same in and out of the country.
Hello, lady. Bye, lady. Bye-bye, gentlemen.
When visiting a foreign country, Their Majesties value and show interest in the history and culture of that country. In advance of the visit, they listen to reports about the history and culture of the country from various experts, while also deepening their understanding by reading materials about the country. Their Majesties are also deeply interested in people of Japanese descent whose ancestors left their home country to live in a foreign land. To date, His Majesty has made 3 visits to Brazil, a country where many people of Japanese descent reside. A welcoming ceremony at the palace is held for visiting state guests. After that, Their Majesties meet the state guest at the Imperial Palace. In the evening, a banquet is held at the Imperial Palace to which important officials from Japan and overseas are invited. In his words of welcome, His Majesty touches on the history of exchanges and the people who have built bridges between the two countries, and expresses his hope that the relations between the two countries will develop further. When kings or queens from a foreign country visit as state guests, His Majesty, together with Her Majesty, sometimes takes them on a trip outside Tokyo. By introducing the culture and history of Japan, and through exchanges with the people, His Majesty hopes to help deepen mutual understanding and goodwill. When members of royal families and state guests visit Japan, they are given an audience or invited to tea at the Imperial Palace or dine at the Imperial Residence.
国際親善のもとは人と人との相互理解であり、その上に立って友好関係が築かれていくものと考えます。国と国との関係は経済情勢など良い時も 悪い時もありますが、人と人との関係は国と国との関係を超えて続いていくものと思います。
The three palace sanctuaries are located in the imperial palace grounds. Many ritual ceremonies of the imperial palace are performed here. His Majesty purifies himself, changes into ceremonial clothing, and prays for the peace of the country and productiveness of the grain. There are more than 20 rituals a year in which His Majesty offers prayers. In October 2013, the Shikinen Sengu ceremony, rebuilding the shrine every 20 years, was held at Ise Grand Shrine. On the same day, His Majesty offered prayers in the direction of the shrine at the Shinkaden State Hall. In a tradition inherited from Emperor Shōwa, every year His Majesty personally sows seed rice and transplants the rice seedlings in the paddy at the Imperial Palace grounds. He then tends to the rice plants as they grow and reaps the rice in autumn. The fully grown rice plants are dedicated to the Ise Grand Shrine, and the polished rice is provided to the Imperial Ancestors Shrine in the Imperial Palace sanctuaries, together with rice offered to the gods from throughout Japan. His Majesty made the following comment about these ceremonies and rituals.
私は昭和天皇から伝わってきたものはほとんど受け継ぎ、これを守ってきました。この中には新嘗祭のように古くから伝えられてきた伝統的祭祀もありますが、田植えのように昭和天皇から始められた行事もあります。新嘗祭のように古い伝統のあるものはそのままの形を残していくことが大切と考えますが、田植えのように新しく始められた行事は形よりはそれを行う意義を重視していくことが望ましいと考えます。
For many years, His Majesty has made a taxonomic study of gobies. He has found time in between his busy schedule of official duties to continue his studies and research in the biological laboratory in the Imperial Palace grounds.
これですね。ニュースピーシーズを。
He has identified 8 new species of gobies and published more than 30 papers on the results of his research. As a member of the Ichthyological Society of Japan, ISJ, His Majesty attends meetings of the society when his schedule allows. He also attends ichthyological symposiums and converses with other researchers. In 1998, His Majesty was awarded the King Charles II Medal by the Royal Society of London, awarded to those heads of state who have made outstanding contributions to the advancement of science. For his contributions as a researcher, in 1980, His Majesty became a foreign member of the world-renowned Linnean Society of London. In 2007, as a foreign member of the world-renowned Linnean Society of London, a global academic society for biological science, His Majesty gave a 45-minute keynote speech in English at the celebration of the 300th anniversary of the birth of Carl von Linné. Their Majesties visit one of the several imperial villas several times each year for rest and recuperation. In early spring, they spend a few days at the Hayama Imperial Villa in Kanagawa Prefecture. In summer, they spend time at the Nasu Imperial Villa in Tochigi Prefecture. This is the Nasu Heisei no Mori Forest. It was originally a part of the Nasu Imperial Villa, but His Majesty suggested on the 20th anniversary of the Emperor's accession that it be recreated into a park open to the public. In the park, His Majesty and Her Majesty have friendly conversations with the people enjoying the nature of Nasu. In the spring of 2013, Their Majesties embarked on their first ever private trip to visit the Anzu no Sato Agri Park in Nagano Prefecture. In the summer, they visited Itate village and other places in Fukushima Prefecture, which were affected by the nuclear accident following the Great East Japan earthquake. His Majesty is busy fulfilling his duties every day, but on Sundays he often enjoys driving his car and strolling around the East Gardens of the Imperial Palace with Her Majesty. They walk through the grounds observing the trees and flowers. His Majesty wanted the visitors to enjoy the garden as much as possible and came up with the idea of attaching nameplates on the trees made of materials that are tree-friendly and will not harm the trees. At His Majesty's suggestion, the ponds in the East Gardens are stocked with the new carp species, butterfly koi. Their Majesties feed the carp when they are out strolling around the pond. Their Majesties often stop by the orchard with ancient variety of fruit trees as well. His Majesty decided to plant fruit tree varieties from the Edo period here, at the site of Edo Castle. So in April 2008, he planted the trees together with Her Majesty. At the end of their stroll, they climb the Tenshudai, the remains of the main tower, where they observe the runners jogging around the Imperial Palace, as well as Tokyo's Skytree, which they have been observing since construction began. When he has time, His Majesty sometimes plays tennis with Her Majesty and the staff of the Imperial Household Agency at the tennis court in the Imperial Palace grounds. His Majesty always pairs with Her Majesty to play doubles. After the game, they enjoy conversing with those present until it is time for them to leave the court. In the spring, His Majesty sows dry land rice and millet in the field of the Imperial Palace grounds with the families of the Crown Prince and Prince Akihito, and harvests the crops with them in the autumn. His Majesty is joined by his family on New Year, birthdays, and enjoys dining together and conversing with them. In 2013, His Majesty celebrated his 80th birthday. At the press conference commemorating 50 years of their Majesty's marriage, Her Majesty said the following about His Majesty.
結婚以来、今日まで、陛下はいつもご自分の立場を深く自覚なさり、東宮でいらした頃には将来の象徴として、後に天皇におなりになってからは日本国、そして国民統合の象徴としてご自分のあるべき姿を求めて歩んでこられました。こうしたご努力の中で、陛下は国や人々に寄せる気持ちを時とともに深められ、国の出来事や人々の喜び、悲しみにお心を沿わせていらしたように思います。陛下はご即位にあたり、これまでの皇室の伝統的行事および祭祀とも昭和天皇の御代のものをほぼ全部お引き継ぎになりました。また皇室が過去の伝統とともに現代を生きることの大切さを深く思われ、日本各地に住む人々の生活に心を寄せ、人々と共に今という時代に丁寧に関わりつつ、一つの時代を築いてこられたように思います。
His Majesty has always lived his days wishing for the happiness of the people of Japan. It is our sincere wish that His Majesty will continue to lead a long and healthy life with Her Majesty.